The autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. 40 stories above Boston's Innovation District, the city stretched out before me, a landscape of opportunity I'd once only dreamed of conquering. I ran my fingers along the edge of my custom glass desk, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath my fingertips. "Is there anything else you need, Jen?" Samantha asked, standing in my doorway with her tablet ready, her efficiency as impeccable as always. I glanced up from the quarterly reports I'd been reviewing and offered a small smile. "No, that's all. For today, Sam, the investor presentation looks solid. Make sure the team knows their contributions didn't go unnoticed." "Already done," she nodded, her dark hair falling perfectly around her shoulders. "The car will be ready at 6 to take you to the Goldman dinner." "Perfect, thank you." As the door closed behind her, I turned my chair toward the windows, watching as the late afternoon light painted the harbor in shades of amber and gold. Vitality Medical Solutions now occupied 3 floors of Boston's most prestigious tech tower, AI. Far cry from the tiny incubator space where I'd first sketched out designs for our breakthrough glucose monitoring system. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Robert had walked out, leaving nothing but a hastily packed suitcase and the echo of the front door slamming behind him. 3 years since I'd stood alone in our Cambridge brownstone, 5 months pregnant, reading the text that changed everything. "I can't do this anymore. Vanessa and I are moving to San Francisco. I'm sorry." No warning, no discussion. Just 12 words that collapsed the future we'd planned like a house of cards. No mention of the child growing inside me. No acknowledgement of 8 years together, shattered by his sudden infatuation with a pharmaceutical rep 10 years my junior. I placed my hand on the framed photo on my desk. My daughter Lily, now 2.5, with her curly auburn hair and bright green eyes that mirrored mine, not his. She was the one beautiful thing that had emerged from that devastating betrayal. The force that had propelled me forward when giving up seemed like the only option. The intercom buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. "Ms. Miller," Sam's voice came through, slightly hesitant. "HR sent up the finalized contracts for the new hires. They need your signature before close of business." "Send them in," I replied, straightening the lapels of my charcoal blazer and smoothing back my hair, cut shorter now than I'd ever worn it during my marriage. Another small act of reclamation. The HR packet was thick, 20 new employees, joining Vitality next week, part of our expansion after securing FDA approval for our continuous monitoring platform. I flipped through the profiles, scanning qualifications and placement details, when my hand froze on page 14. Robert Taylor, age 9, position, senior marketing strategist. My heart lurched. The photo stared back at me, his hair slightly grayer. At the temples, new lines around his eyes, but unmistakably him, the man who had walked out on me and our unborn daughter to pursue a relationship with a woman he'd known for all of 6 weeks. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then a strange calm washed over me as I read his placement details again. Senior, marketing strategist, a lateral move at best from his previous role, certainly not the executive position he'd always coveted. He had no idea who owned Vitality Medical Solutions. I'd built the company under my maiden name, Miller, not the Taylor, surname I'd so eagerly adopted when we married. The corporate structure was deliberately complex, a maze of holdings and investments I'd carefully constructed while building Vitality from the ground up. Did he know he'd applied to work for his ex-wife? Had he seen my name anywhere in the process? No, impossible. I'd remained deliberately private, keeping my name off public documents, staying out of press photos, building my empire from behind the scenes. The few corporate headshots in circulation were carefully curated, showing a poised professional entrepreneur, not the devastated pregnant woman he'd abandoned. before my pregnancy, before his betrayal, before I'd transformed grief into ambition. I stared at his application details. Robert Taylor, once the marketing director at Anderson Medical Group, the same company where we'd met a decade ago, now applying for a mid-level position at age 39. What had happened in the years since he'd walked out? According to his resume, the San Francisco dream had evaporated within 18 months. His employment history showed a downward trajectory since leaving Boston. 3 companies in 3 years, each position less prestigious than the last. The golden future he'd envisioned with Vanessa had apparently tarnished quickly. My fingers hovered over the signature line. I could reject the application. One stroke of my pen, and he'd never set foot in my building. I could delegate the task to HR with a simple, not a cultural fit note, and he would never know how close he'd come to working for the woman he'd abandoned. Instead, I signed. As I finished the last of the paperwork, my phone buzzed with a text. From Diana, my neighbor who watched Lily on late meeting days. Little Miss asking for her special mac and cheese for dinner. Official cookbook consultation required? I smiled, typing back. Tell the chef her recipe is approved. I'll be home in an hour. Closing the HR file, I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool against my back. Robert Taylor would be reporting to work next Monday, completely unaware that the woman he'd left behind was now signing his paychecks. The irony was almost poetic. The sun had nearly set as I gathered my things, sliding the HR packet into my leather portfolio. Tomorrow would be interesting, to say the least. Car's waiting, Ms. Miller, Sam informed me as I stepped out of my office. Thank you, Sam. See you tomorrow. I walked toward the private elevator, my mind already formulating a plan. Robert wouldn't be working on my floor, of course. Marketing was housed on the 32nd floor, while my executive suite occupied the 40th. He'd report to Marcus in brand strategy, who reported to Claire in communications, who reported to me. 3 layers of management between us, enough distance to observe without direct contact. The elevator doors closed, and I descended from my penthouse office toward the waiting car, my thoughts racing ahead to Monday. What would I do if we crossed? Paths in the lobby? Would he recognize me? I'd changed in 3 years. My hair was different, styled with an authority I'd never embodied when we were together. I'd lost the softness pregnancy had given me. Success had reshaped me, hardened my edges in ways that might render me unrecognizable to the man who'd once promised to love me forever. Home, Ms. Miller? Asked Thomas, my driver, as he opened the car door. Yes, please. As the car pulled into traffic, I opened my tablet and pulled up the company directory. A few quick taps granted me access to security protocols reserved for executive management. I entered Robert's employee ID and flagged it for enhanced monitoring. All his computer activities, building access, even lunch breaks would now be logged and reported directly to my private server. It wasn't paranoia, it was insurance. I needed to know what kind of man Robert Taylor had become in the 3 years since he'd abandoned his pregnant wife. I needed to understand why he was back in Boston, what had happened to Vanessa, and most importantly, whether he posed any threat to the life I'd built for Lily and myself. The city lights blurred outside my window as we drove toward Cambridge. I closed my eyes briefly, remembering the day I'd brought Lily home from the hospital, alone, terrified, but determined. Diana had been there, my neighbor turned friend turned lifeline, showing up with homemade lasagna and years of childcare wisdom as a single mother herself. Those first months had been a blur of midnight feedings, pitch decks, and tears. I'd taken investor meetings with a newborn strapped to my chest, pitched to venture capitalists while pumping between presentations, closed our Series A funding 3 weeks after giving birth. Every milestone, Lily's first smile, first step, first word, had fueled my determination to build something meaningful, something that would ensure she never wanted for anything. My thoughts drifted to Robert again, What would he say if he knew about the daughter he'd never met? The child whose existence he'd acknowledged with nothing more than child support payments arranged through lawyers, the bare minimum legally required, with no attempt at visitation or connection. The car pulled into our driveway, the security gate closing behind us. Our home, a renovated brownstone I'd purchased with Vitality's first major funding round, glowed warmly in the evening light. I could see Lily's small silhouette in the kitchen window, standing on her step stool next to Diana. "We're here, Ms. Miller," Thomas said, opening my door. "Thank you, Thomas. 7:30 tomorrow, please." Inside, the smell of cheese and the sound of giggles greeted me. I dropped my portfolio in the entryway and followed the noise to our kitchen, where Lily was helping Diana stir a pot on the stove. "Mommy!" Lily squealed, abandoning her post to launch herself into my arms. I caught her, burying my face in her curls, breathing in the scent of her baby shampoo and the faint aroma of cheese. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Hi, Pumpkin," I said, kissing her forehead. "I see you're making your famous mac and cheese." Lily nodded solemnly. "With the special cheese." I exchanged a grateful look with Diana over Lily's head. "Thank you for staying late." "Anytime," Diana said, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "She's done her letters practice, and we read 2 books after her bath." After Diana left, Lily led me to the table where she'd already set 2 places with her favorite animal-shaped plates. I kicked off my heels and let her serve me, making a show of tasting her creation. "This is the best mac and cheese I've ever had," I declared, earning a proud smile that lit up her entire face. "How was work today, Mommy?" she asked, carefully navigating her spoon to her mouth. "Busy," I answered, watching her with a love so fierce it sometimes took my breath away. "I signed some papers for new people to join our company." "People who help make the special watches?" she asked, referring to our glucose monitors in the way she'd understood them since I'd first explained my work. "That's right. Special watches that help people stay healthy." We ate together, Lily chattering about her day at preschool, me soaking in every word, pushing thoughts of Robert to the back of my mind. This was our reality now. Lily and me, our little family of 2, complete and whole in our own way. After dinner, bath time, and 2 bedtime stories, I tucked Lily in, kissing her forehead as her eyelids grew heavy. "Love you to the stars," I whispered, our nightly ritual. "And back to Earth," she mumbled sleepily, her small hand curled around her favorite stuffed elephant. I stood in her doorway, watching her chest rise and fall, marveling at the resilient, joyful person she was. Becoming, in many ways, Robert's abandonment had been her gain. It had transformed me into a mother with an unshakable purpose, a woman who had built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. Back in my home office, I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and opened my laptop. The evening stretched before me, time to prepare for Monday's encounter, however indirect it might be. I pulled up Robert's application again, studying it more carefully. Employment history showed he'd left his San Francisco position after just 18 months. A quick search revealed that Vanessa Reed now worked for a pharmaceutical company in Chicago without Robert. They had apparently lasted less than 2 years. His credit report revealed significant debt, credit cards maxed out, student loans in deferment, a lease agreement for an apartment in a less desirable part of Boston. The man who had abandoned me because he needed freedom had apparently found only financial instability. I took a sip of wine, letting the information settle. Part of me, a small, wounded part I thought I'd silenced years ago, felt a vindictive satisfaction. But the CEO in me remained analytical, calculating, searching for the bigger picture. Why had he applied to Vitality? We weren't known for our generous compensation packages for mid-level positions. Our reputation was built on innovation and impact. We hired the best and expected excellence. The Robert I knew had always prioritized title and status over substance. Something didn't add up. I searched his social media profiles. Not much activity in recent years, but his relationship status was single. No evidence of other children or significant attachments. His last post, 2 months ago, was a quote about second chances and new beginnings. Had he known? Was this deliberate? I scrolled through our online presence, evaluating what information was publicly available. My role as founder was documented, but press releases always used Jennifer Miller with minimal personal details. Corporate materials featured our leadership team, but emphasized our technology and impact rather than individual stories. No, this had to be coincidence. A cruel twist of fate that had brought Robert back into my orbit, just as Vitality was preparing for its IPO, the culmination of 3 years of relentless work and sacrifice. I closed the laptop and moved to the window, staring out at the Boston skyline glittering against the night sky. Monday morning, Robert Taylor would walk into my company completely unaware that his past had circled back to claim him. Would I reveal myself? Confront him? Fire him on the spot? No, that would be too simple, too quick. 3 years ago, he'd walked away without facing the consequences of his actions. This time, I wanted him to understand exactly what he'd thrown away, exactly who I'd become in his absence. I finished my wine and headed to bed, my mind made up. I would watch, wait, and when the moment was right, I would show Robert Taylor exactly who now controlled his professional future. The woman he'd once dismissed as not enough, not exciting enough, not ambitious enough, not worthy of his loyalty, was now the CEO of one of Boston's fastest-growing medical technology companies, about to go public with a valuation that would make headlines across the industry. The same woman who had cried herself to sleep night after night, wondering what she had done wrong, wondering why she hadn't been enough, was now more than enough for herself, for her daughter, and for the hundreds of employees who depended on her leadership. Robert Taylor had walked away once without consequences. This time would be different. This time I would determine when and how our story ended. Morning came with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed with particular care, a tailored navy suit, crimson silk blouse, and the Louboutins I'd bought myself to celebrate Vitality's first $1 million in revenue. The diamond studs in my ears caught the light as I leaned forward to apply a final touch of lipstick, another gift to myself when we secured our Series B funding. "You look especially nice today," Diana commented as she arrived to help with Lily's breakfast. She'd started coming earlier on Mondays to give me time for my weekly executive team meeting. "Big day," I replied, accepting the coffee she offered. "New hires starting." Lily looked up from her cereal, milk dripping from her spoon. "Can I come see your work someday, Mommy?" "Of course, Pumpkin," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Maybe next week for the company picnic." She beamed at me, unaware that her father would be walking through the doors of my company in approximately 1 hour. The thought sent a strange thrill through me, part anxiety, part anticipation. Thomas was waiting in the driveway, car door open. "Good morning, Ms. Miller." "Morning, Thomas. We need to make a stop today." "Of course. Where to?" "The north entrance, please. I want to observe the new hire orientation." If Thomas found the request unusual, he didn't show it. "Yes, ma'am." New employees traditionally entered through the north entrance where HR conducted orientations before assigning them to their departments. The executive entrance where I typically arrived was on the opposite side of the building, allowing me a rare opportunity to observe without being noticed. We pulled up to the side of the building at 8:40 a.m. Orientation began at 9, and Vitality enforced punctuality as a core value. "Wait here, please," I instructed Thomas, stepping out of the car. The morning air was crisp as I positioned myself near a coffee cart across from the entrance, pretending to take a call while observing the stream of nervous new hires arriving. Most were young, dressed in their interview best, clutching portfolios and travel mugs, shooting anxious glances at the imposing glass building. Then I saw him. Robert walked with less confidence than I remembered, his shoulders slightly hunched, in a suit that had seen better days. His hair was thinner now, with threads of gray at the temples that hadn't been there 3 years ago. He checked his watch repeatedly as he approached the entrance, his expression tense. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 3 years of imagining this moment hadn't prepared me for the reality of seeing him again, the man who had promised to support me through pregnancy and parenthood, who had placed his hand on my growing belly and talked about our future together, who had left without a proper goodbye when someone newer, younger had caught his eye. He passed within 10 feet of me, eyes straight ahead, not sparing a glance for the woman in the navy suit pretending to be deeply engaged in a phone conversation. He didn't recognize me. Of course not. The Jennifer he'd known had been softer, more trusting, her edges not yet honed by betrayal and determination. I watched him disappear into the building, then waited a few minutes before returning to the car. Main entrance now, Thomas. Back in my office, I pulled up the security, feeds on my private monitor. Split-screen views showed the orientation room where Robert and 19 other new hires were being welcomed to Vitality Medical Solutions. I watched as they received their security badges, signed final paperwork, and began their company introduction. Sam knocked and entered with my morning schedule. The FDA team will be calling at 10, and the board wants to move Thursday's meeting to Wednesday at 2. Fine, I said, not taking my eyes off the monitor. Also, I want an update on the new hires by end of day. How they're settling in, initial supervisor impressions, that sort of thing. All 20 of them? Sam raised an eyebrow. Is that a problem? No, Ms. Miller. I'll have it for you by... When she left, I returned my attention to the security feed. The orientation group was now touring the facilities. I watched Robert's face as he moved through the building, noting how his eyes widened at the state-of-the-art technology, the sleek design, the evident success of Vitality. Did he regret his choices? Did he wonder what might have been if he'd stayed? The day progressed in a blur of meetings and decisions. By late afternoon, the new hires had been dispatched to their respective departments. Robert was now sitting at a workstation in the marketing division, receiving training from a team lead. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Miller, Marcus Phillips from Marketing is here with the quarterly campaign analysis. Perfect timing. Send him in. Marcus entered, tablet in hand. He'd been with Vitality for 2 years, working his way up from junior copywriter to team lead through dedication and innovative thinking. The numbers look good, Ms. Miller, he began, opening a presentation on his tablet. We're seeing a 28% increase in physician engagement since launching the new Diabetes Educator portal. Excellent. How are the new team members settling in? So far, so good. We've got 2 starting today, Alicia Rodriguez and Robert Taylor. Alicia's a recent grad with some impressive internships. Robert's a bit older, coming from the pharmaceutical sector. Seems eager to learn our approach, though. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I noticed that Taylor's resume shows quite a career change. Any insights? Marcus hesitated. He mentioned some personal setbacks, didn't elaborate. His strategic thinking is solid, but he'll need to adapt to our patient-centered approach. I've got him starting on the provider education materials. Straightforward, but important. I see. Keep me updated on his progress, will you? I'm interested in these career transitions. Of course, Ms. Miller. After Marcus left, I pulled up the provider education campaign. It was indeed straightforward. Important, but hardly glamorous work. Nothing like the high-profile launches Robert had once led at Anderson Medical. How the mighty had fallen. By 5:30, Sam delivered the promised update on the new hires. I flipped straight to Robert's entry. Robert Taylor, Senior Marketing Strategist, Supervisor notes, attentive during training, asks relevant questions, completed initial onboarding modules efficiently. Some unfamiliarity with our proprietary analytics software. Mentioned housing situation during lunch break. Recently relocated following end of lease. Currently in temporary accommodations. Temporary accommodations. That aligned with what I'd found in my research. I wondered what else had happened in the years since he'd walked out. Where was Vanessa now? Had there been others after her? What had brought him back to Boston with his tail between his legs? I closed the file, my mind made up. Sam, I need you to do something discreetly. Contact Marcus and have him assign Robert Taylor to the Cleveland Clinic presentation next month. Sam looked surprised. The major partnership pitch? But Ms. Miller, that's usually reserved for team members who've been here at least 6 months. I'm aware. Tell him it's a test case. We're evaluating experienced new hires differently than recent graduates. He'll understand. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was indeed testing Robert, just not in the way Marcus would assume. The Cleveland Clinic partnership was crucial to our expansion plans, and the presentation was notoriously demanding. Most team leads spent weeks preparing. Robert would have days. I wanted to see what he was made of now, whether the charm and confidence that had once defined him would resurface under pressure. As I packed up for the day, my phone rang. Lily's preschool. My heart raced as I answered. Ms. Miller? This is Director Goldman. There's been an incident with Lily. Is she hurt? I was already grabbing my keys. No, nothing like that. There was a disagreement during circle time. Lily became upset when another child mentioned Father's Day activities. My stomach dropped. I'll be right there. 20 minutes later, I sat in the director's office, Lily beside me, her small hand in mine. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her normally cheerful expression clouded. Tyler said everyone has a daddy, and I said that's not true. Some kids just have mommies, she explained, her voice small. And he said I must have done something bad to make my daddy go away. Each word was a knife to my heart. I pulled her close, feeling her small body tremble. You did nothing wrong, Lily. Nothing at all. Director Goldman looked sympathetic. Tyler has been spoken to about his comments, but we wanted you to know about the incident since Lily was quite upset. Thank you, I said, stroking Lily's curls. We'll talk about better ways to handle these situations. Outside in the car, Lily was quiet, staring out the window. Mommy, why did my daddy leave? Didn't he want to meet me? The question I'd been dreading for years, delivered with such raw vulnerability that I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. Your father, I began carefully, wasn't ready to be a parent. That was his loss, Lily, not yours. Never. Yours. But everyone else has a daddy. Not everyone, sweetheart. Remember, Elena has 2 mommies and Zach lives with his grandparents. Families come in all different shapes. She nodded, but I could see the questions lingering in her eyes, questions I couldn't fully answer without revealing the depth of Robert's betrayal, the magnitude of what he'd thrown away. That night after Lily was asleep, I sat in my office, staring at Robert's employee file on my tablet. His emergency contact was listed as Patricia Taylor, his mother, the same woman who'd once been excited to become a grandmother, who'd helped organize our baby shower, who'd stopped returning my calls the day after Robert left. Had she known he was planning to abandon us? Had she supported his decision? I closed the file, suddenly exhausted. 3 years of building walls around my heart, of channeling pain into purpose, and all it took was one day of having Robert back in my periphery to make those walls tremble. But I wouldn't break. Not again. This time, I held all the cards. I opened my calendar and scheduled a company-wide meeting for Friday afternoon, a quarterly update where all departments would gather in the main auditorium. Robert would be there, along with every other employee of Vitality Medical Solutions. It would be his first glimpse of the CEO he now worked for, his first realization of whose company he'd joined, his first understanding of the woman he'd left behind. I went to bed that night with a plan forming in my mind. Robert Taylor had walked away once without consequences. This time would be different. This time, I would determine when and how his story ended. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, the hallways empty except for the occasional security guard. I liked these moments before the day officially began. Time to think without interruption. I'd slept poorly, Lily's questions about her father echoing in my mind. For 2.5 years, I'd managed to deflect her curiosity with age-appropriate half-truths, but as she grew more perceptive, vague explanations wouldn't be enough. What would I tell her when she was old enough to understand abandonment? How would I explain why her father had never made any attempt to know her? My private monitor displayed the security feeds from throughout the building. I clicked through until I found the marketing department, still dark, of course. Robert wouldn't arrive for another hour. Early morning, Ms. Miller? I turned to find Claire Thomas, my communications director, standing in my doorway with 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this, she said, offering one to me. Saw your light on when I came in? Claire had been with me from the beginning. My second hire when Vitality was nothing more than a concept and a patent application. She knew about my pregnancy, about Robert walking out, about the sleepless nights bringing Lily home from the hospital. While simultaneously trying to secure our first round of funding, she didn't know Robert now worked for us. Thanks, I said, accepting the coffee. Couldn't sleep. She leaned against my desk, studying me with the familiar scrutiny that had made her invaluable as my confidant. Something's up. You've got that look. What look? The one you had before you fired the entire regulatory team last year. The someone's about to discover actions have consequences look. I hesitated, deciding transparency with Claire was necessary. Robert Taylor is one of our new marketing strategists. Her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Robert Taylor as in Lily's father? As in the jerk who left you for that pharma rep half your age? Yes. Jesus, Jen. She set her cup down. Does he know you own Vitality? No, and I'd like to keep it that way for now. Claire processed this information, her expression shifting from shock to something closer to calculation. Like me, she'd built her career on strategic thinking. The company meeting on Friday, she said slowly. You're planning to reveal yourself then? Perhaps. And then what? Fire him on the spot? That would be quite the power move. I turned, back to the monitors. I haven't decided yet. Claire was quiet for a moment. You know, in the 3 years I've known you, you've never once mentioned wanting revenge on him. I didn't. Building Vitality, raising Lily, those were my priorities. And now? Now he's walked right into my company, Claire. What would you do? She considered this. I'd want to understand why. Why now? Why here? Coincidences this big make me suspicious. I hadn't considered that angle. Could Robert have known? But how? I'd been careful, methodical about keeping my identity as CEO private. Look into it, I instructed. Discreetly. See if there's any connection we're missing. Will do. She picked up her coffee again. And Jen, whatever you decide, I've got your back. After she left, I pulled up Robert's application timeline again. He'd applied 4 weeks ago, been interviewed by HR and Marcus from marketing, with no interaction with senior management. Standard procedure for mid-level positions. Nothing suspicious there. At 8:45, my intercom buzzed. Ms. Miller, you're 9. M with the patent attorneys is set up in conference room C, Sam informed me. Thank you. I'll be right there. The morning disappeared in a flurry of meetings, IP protection, clinical trial results, investor relations, strategic planning for next quarter. But beneath it all, my mind kept returning to Robert, now somewhere in the building creating marketing materials for a company he didn't realize was mine. By lunchtime, I needed to see him again, not through security cameras, but in person. I texted Claire, "Need to observe Art Taylor in natural habitat. Suggestions?" Her reply came quickly. "Surprise quality check on marketing collateral at 1:15. I'll create a diversion for Marcus so he doesn't announce you." At 1:12, I stepped into the elevator heading down to the 32nd floor, heart hammering against my ribs. This was irrational, unprofessional. I was the CEO, for God's sake, not some lovesick teenager. But I needed to see him, see how he operated in my company, among my employees. The marketing department occupied the southwest corner of the 32nd floor, an open-concept workspace with clusters of desks arranged around collaborative areas. I entered through the side door, using my master keycard to bypass the standard security alert that announced visitors. I spotted him immediately. Robert sat at a desk near the windows, brow furrowed in concentration as he navigated through what appeared to be our brand guidelines. His workspace was bare except for a company-issued laptop and a water bottle. No personal items, no photos. Nothing to indicate a life outside these walls. I moved quietly between the desks, nodding to employees who noticed me. Most were too absorbed in their work to look up. I positioned myself at a vacant desk about 30 feet from Robert, opening a random file on the computer to appear busy while I observed him. He looked tired. The confident marketing director I'd married had been replaced by a man who checked his work repeatedly, who seemed to second-guess each action before committing. When a younger colleague stopped to offer help navigating our content management system, his smile was grateful but strained. "That's it exactly," I heard him say. "Thanks, Alicia. I've been stuck on this for 15 minutes. "No problem," the young woman replied. "The interface is super unintuitive at first. Took me weeks during my internship to get the hang of it." Their easy camaraderie surprised me. The Robert I remembered had always maintained a professional distance from colleagues, viewing workplace friendships as potential complications. My phone vibrated silently, a text from Claire. "Marcus heading back to department. Wrap it up." I stood, closing the file I'd opened and turned to leave. That's when Robert looked up, his eyes sweeping across the room and landing briefly on me. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought he recognized me. His gaze lingered a fraction too long, a slight crease appearing between his eyebrows. Then, Alicia asked him a question, and the moment passed. He turned back to his screen, and I slipped out the side door, exhaling slowly once I was safely in the hallway. "Ms. Miller?" Marcus had arrived, looking surprised to find me there. "Was there something you needed from marketing?" "Just a quick visual assessment," I replied smoothly. "The quarterly audit is coming up, and I like to see departments in their natural state before the formal review." "Of course. Would you like me to show you anything specific?" "No need. I've seen what I came for." Back in my office, I replayed the moment in my mind. Had he recognized me? No. There had been no shock, no double take. Just a brief moment of curious attention, the kind anyone might give to a stranger who seemed out of place. My phone rang, Lily's preschool again. My stomach clenched as I answered. "Ms. Miller, it's Lily's teacher, Ms. Peterson. Nothing's wrong," she added quickly, sensing my anxiety. "I just wanted to discuss something from class today." I relaxed slightly. "Go ahead." "We're doing family portrait projects this week. When I explained the assignment, Lily became upset. She said she couldn't complete it because she only has half a family. I assured her that all family structures are valid, but I thought you should know." Another knife to the heart. "Thank you for telling me. I'll talk with her tonight." After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the phone. Lily's pain was my pain, magnified and sharpened by my inability to shield her from the reality of Robert's abandonment. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Miller, the Cleveland Clinic presentation." Coach is here to discuss next week's session, Sam announced. Send them in. Anthony Rivera, our presentation skills trainer, entered with a tablet and a concerned expression. Ms. Miller, I received the directive about including Robert Taylor in next week's Cleveland pitch, but I'm concerned. It's a complex presentation, and we typically give team members more time to prepare. Noted. However, I want to test a new approach to employee development. Some people rise to challenges when given the opportunity. With all due respect, the Cleveland partnership is worth millions. We can't afford any missteps. I understand your concerns, Anthony, but Mr. Taylor has extensive presentation experience from his previous roles. I believe he may surprise us. He looked skeptical, but nodded. I'll prepare the materials, but I should warn you, our success rate for new hires in major presentations is less than 60%. Then we'll see which percentage Mr. Taylor falls into, won't we? After he left, I scheduled a meeting with our head of HR for the following morning. If I was going to test Robert's capabilities, I needed to ensure everything was properly documented. At 5:45, Sam brought in the daily update on new hires. Mr. Taylor completed all his onboarding modules today, she reported. His supervisor notes he's catching on quickly but seems anxious about job security. Apparently, he asked twice about the probationary period policies. Interesting. Anything else? Sam consulted her notes. He mentioned childcare difficulties to a colleague during lunch, something about arrangements falling through. My eyebrows shot up. Childcare? He has a child? That's what was reported, but no details were provided. His HR file lists him as single with no dependents. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Could Robert have another child? A child he hadn't abandoned? Thank you, Sam. That's all for today. After she left, I pulled up our employee database, accessing personal information I rarely examined. Robert's health insurance enrollment showed only himself, no dependents. His emergency contact was still his mother. Tax withholding indicated single filing status. If he had another child, they weren't officially acknowledged in his employment records. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the files. Why did the possibility upset me so much? I'd moved on years ago. Robert's life was no longer connected to mine except through Lily, the daughter he'd never met, never acknowledged. Except now he worked for me. Now his livelihood depended on my company, my decisions. I left the office earlier than usual, instructing Thomas to take me to Lily's preschool for pickup rather than home where Diana would have already collected her. Lily's face lit up when she saw me waiting in the pickup line. "Mommy, you came to school." "Surprise," I said, helping her with her backpack. "I thought we could get ice cream before dinner." Her eyes widened. "Really? But it's a school night." "Sometimes we need to break the rules a little." At the ice cream parlor, Lily happily devoured a scoop of strawberry while I picked at my vanilla. Ms. Peterson told me about the family portrait project, I said carefully. Lily's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "I don't want to do it." "Why not?" "Because everyone else has big families with lots of people. Mine would just be you and me." Her bottom lip trembled slightly. "Oh, Lily." I reached across the table to take her small hand. Families come in all sizes and shapes. Some of the strongest families have just a few people. But what about when you have to draw your dad? I don't even know what he looks like. The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course, I'd put away all photos of Robert after he left, erasing him from our home as completely as he'd erased us from his life. "Would you like to see pictures of him?" I asked carefully. She nodded, eyes wide. "Do you have some?" "In storage. We can look at them tonight if you want." She considered this, then nodded again, more firmly. "Yes, for my project." That night, after Lily was in bed, I retrieved a small box from the back of my closet, the last remaining evidence of my life with Robert. Inside were wedding photos, vacation snapshots, the sonogram picture he'd carried in his wallet until the day he walked out. I selected a few appropriate images: Robert at his college graduation, Robert at a company picnic, Robert and me on our honeymoon, faces glowing with a happiness that now seemed like a cruel joke. Nothing that would reveal the depth of what he'd thrown away. Nothing that would show Lily how completely he had once promised to love us both. Tomorrow I'd give her these photos for her project. Tomorrow I'd help her create a family portrait that acknowledged his existence without glorifying his role in our lives. And tomorrow, I'd decide exactly how to proceed with the man who now created marketing materials for the company I'd built while raising the child he'd abandoned. Morning came with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in days. I'd spent half the night thinking about Robert, about Lily, about the tangled web that connected us. I found some pictures, I told Lily over breakfast, sliding an envelope across the table. For your project. She opened it eagerly, eyes widening as she examined each photo. He looks like me, she whispered, touching a picture of Robert laughing at a company picnic. You have his smile, I admitted. It was true. Lily's dimpled grin was pure Robert, though her eyes and determination were all mine. Was he nice? She asked. How to answer that? The Robert I'd married had been charming, ambitious, attentive. The Robert who'd walked out on his pregnant wife had been selfish, cowardly, cruel. He was complicated, I finally said. People change. Lily. Sometimes they make choices that hurt others. She studied the photos a moment longer. Can I use these for my project? Of course. That's why I found them. At the office, I scheduled an impromptu meeting with Marcus from marketing. How are the new hires progressing? I asked when he arrived. Very well, Ms. Miller. Alicia's already handling some client materials independently, and Robert's moving through the training faster than expected. Tell me more about Taylor. His background is unusual for the position. Marcus shifted in his seat. True, but he's adapting well. Very detail-oriented, careful with the messaging, asks good questions. Any concerns? Nothing serious. He seems, anxious. Like he's waiting for something to go wrong. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I understand he's been selected for the Cleveland Clinic presentation next week. Yes, though I have to say I was surprised by that. We don't usually fast-track new hires, especially for something as high-profile as Cleveland. Consider it an experiment in talent recognition. Some people have untapped potential. Marcus nodded, though he looked unconvinced. Of course, Ms. Miller. After he left, Claire arrived with an update on her investigation. Nothing suspicious, she reported. Robert applied through the normal channels, was interviewed by standard protocols, and accepted the position within our usual timeline. If he knows you own Vitality, there's no evidence of it. What about the childcare comment? Claire hesitated. That's where it gets interesting. I had coffee with Alicia Chen this morning, casually mentioned team dynamics. She said Robert mentioned needing to pick up his kid from after-school care yesterday, because the regular person couldn't make it. But she got the impression it wasn't his child, possibly a niece or nephew. Relief and confusion warred within me. Keep digging, discreetly. Will do. Oh, and Jen, the board is asking questions about the company meeting tomorrow. They're wondering why all departments need to be present for what's usually an executive update. Tell them I'm announcing a new company-wide initiative. It's not entirely false. Claire nodded, understanding in her eyes. And have you decided about Robert? Not yet. At noon, I received the surveillance report I'd requested. Robert had spent the morning focused on his assignment, taking only one break to make a phone call in the stairwell, a conversation our audio couldn't capture. He'd eaten lunch alone at his desk, reviewing materials while he ate a sandwich brought from home. Nothing revelatory, Nothing to indicate he was anything other than a struggling former marketing director trying to rebuild his career from the ground up. Why wasn't that satisfaction enough? I'd succeeded where he'd failed. I'd built an empire while raising our child alone. His current struggles were justice, weren't they? Yet something felt unfinished, incomplete. At 2:30, my intercom buzzed. "Ms. Miller, your 3-batch is here early. Dr. Lawrence from Cleveland Clinic. Send him in." Dr. James Lawrence himself walked through my door, Chief of Innovation at Cleveland Clinic and the key decision-maker for our potential partnership. We'd met several times over the past year, developing a mutual respect that I hoped would translate into a multi-million-dollar implementation of our monitoring system. "Jennifer," he greeted me warmly. "Hope you don't mind me arriving early. Traffic was lighter than expected." "Not at all, James. Always good to see you." He settled into the chair across from me, declining my offer of coffee. "I wanted to discuss something before our formal meeting." "Of course. I understand you're fast-tracking a new employee for our presentation next week. Robert Taylor?" I kept my expression carefully neutral. "Yes, we're experimenting with aptitude-based advancement." James's eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting. Coincidence? How so?" "Robert Taylor used to work with my brother at Anderson Medical Group. Charles speaks highly of his marketing acumen, says he was on track for partnership before he suddenly left." My pulse quickened. I wasn't aware of the connection. "Small world in healthcare," James replied with a shrug. "Charles mentioned Taylor went through a rough patch. Personal issues, I think. Said he'd lost touch with him until recently." "Recently?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Yes, ran into him at a fundraiser a few months back. Said Taylor seemed down on his luck, looking for work. Charles might have mentioned Vitality was expanding its marketing team." The pieces clicked into place. Robert hadn't randomly applied to my company. He'd been directed here by the brother of our biggest potential client. "That's quite a coincidence indeed," I managed. James nodded, oblivious to my inner turmoil. "I told Charles I'd keep an eye out for him. Good people deserve second chances, don't you think?" Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang, the special ringtone I'd assigned to Lily's preschool. I excused myself to answer. "Ms. Miller, this is Director Goldman. Lily had an incident during art time. She became very upset while working on her family portrait and is asking for you. She's not hurt, but she's quite distressed." "I'll be right there," I said, already gathering my things. "James, I apologize, but there's an emergency with my daughter. Can we reschedule?" He stood immediately, concern evident. "Of course. Family first, always. I hope everything's all right. Thank you for understanding." In the car, I called Diana, asking her to meet me at the school. My mind raced, processing both Lily's distress and the revelation about Robert's arrival at Vitality. Not a coincidence, not fate, a calculated move suggested by someone connected to my company. Did Robert know? Had Charles Lawrence told him? Who owned Vitality, or had Robert simply followed a job lead, unaware he was walking straight into my domain? Entering the director's office, I found Lily sitting with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. My heart broke at the sight of her obvious distress. "Mommy," she whimpered, launching herself into my arms. I held her close, breathing, in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked gently. Director Goldman handed me the drawing Lily had been working on, a family portrait showing her and me holding hands, with a question mark figure standing nearby. "Lily became upset when the other children asked who the question mark was," she explained quietly. When she explained it was her father, some of the children asked why she didn't know what he looked like, even with photos. I closed my eyes, briefly, cursing the unintentional cruelty of children. "Thank you. I'll take her home now." As we walked to the car, Lily's small hand in mine. She looked up at me with troubled eyes. Tyler said daddies are supposed to live with you, not be in pictures. He said if my daddy doesn't live with us, it means he doesn't love me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Tyler is wrong, I said firmly, kneeling to her level in the parking lot. There are many different kinds of families, and all of them are real and important. Some children live with both parents, some with one, some with grandparents or aunts or uncles. But why doesn't my daddy want to see me? Did I do something wrong? No, Lily, I said fiercely, cupping her face in my hands. You did nothing wrong, nothing at all. Your father made choices before you were even born. Choices that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own fears and weaknesses. She considered this, her little brow furrowed in concentration. Like when Tyler was afraid of the big slide, so he said it was stupid instead of trying it. A surprised laugh escaped me. My daughter's ability to distill complex, emotional situations never ceased to amaze me. Something like that, yes. Sometimes grown-ups run away from things that seem scary instead of being brave and facing them. This explanation seemed to satisfy her for the moment. In the car, she asked if we could get ice cream again, and I agreed, grateful for the simple solution to her immediate distress. The larger questions would return, I knew, but for now, chocolate fudge ripple could work its temporary magic. At home, I sent Diana home early and focused entirely on Lily, making dinner together, building an elaborate fort in the living room, reading 3 bedtime stories instead of our usual one. By the time she fell asleep, her earlier distress seemed forgotten, but the question she'd raised lingered in my mind. What would Robert say if he knew about the daughter he'd abandoned? What would he do if he discovered the child whose existence he'd rejected was now just a few miles away? Did he deserve the chance to know her? Did Lily deserve the opportunity to know her father? I poured myself a glass of wine and settled at my kitchen island, opening my laptop to review the final preparations for tomorrow's company meeting. The base quarterly presentation was ready, with the usual updates on revenue, research developments, and strategic initiatives. The only question remaining was whether I would use the occasion to reveal myself to Robert. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Final background check on RT complete. No criminal history, no lawsuits. Credit is poor, but not disastrous. Currently renting a 1-bedroom apartment in Somerville, month-to-month lease. Vanessa Reed, now engaged to a surgeon in Chicago. No evidence of other children. Annual child support payments to you are his largest recurring expense. I stared at the last sentence, something uncomfortable stirring in my chest. I'd never thought about what those payments meant to Robert financially. To me, they were a drop in the bucket, automatically deposited and immediately transferred to Lily's college fund, money I didn't need or use. But for Robert, living on a fraction of his former salary, they clearly represented a significant sacrifice. Did that matter? Did fulfilling the bare minimum legal obligation deserve any credit? At all? He'd never once asked about Lily, never sent a birthday card, never made any attempt to be part of her life beyond those court-mandated payments. Yet Tyler's cruel words to Lily echoed in my mind. He doesn't love you. Was I allowing my own hurt and anger to deprive my daughter of a relationship she might someday want? Was I protecting her or punishing him? I closed my laptop without making a decision. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, the choice I'd been avoiding since Robert walked into Vitality. Morning brought a flurry of activity, finalizing my presentation, reviewing the quarterly numbers one last time, and selecting my outfit with particular care. I chose a crimson sheath dress that I'd bought to celebrate Vitality's first patent approval. A power color for a power play, should I decide to make one. You look like you're going into battle, Diana commented as she arrived to take Lily to preschool. In a way I am, I admitted, adjusting my diamond stud earrings, another milestone gift to myself that I now wore like armor. Anything you want to talk about? She asked, her knowing gaze taking in my unusually formal appearance. I hesitated, then decided Diana deserved honesty after all she'd done for Lily and me. Robert's working at Vitality. Has been for 3 days now. Her eyes widened. Does he know that I own the company? No. That he has a daughter? Yes, but he's never made any attempt to meet her. Diana absorbed this information, her expression thoughtful. And today? Company-wide meeting. He'll be there. What are you going to do? I sighed, realizing I still hadn't fully decided. I don't know. Part of me wants to watch him squirm, to let everyone know exactly what kind of man he is. Another part thinks that might hurt Lily more than him in the long run. Diana nodded slowly. Lily asked me about her daddy again this morning. Wanted to know if he liked pancakes like she does. My heart clenched at the innocence of the question. What did you tell her? That she'd have to ask you, but Jen. She laid a gentle hand on my arm. Children need to know where they come from, even when that story isn't perfect. Whatever you decide about Robert, Lily deserves the truth, a version of it anyway, sooner rather than later. I knew she was right. The family portrait incident had made that clear. I'll talk to her this weekend, I promised. At the office, the morning passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. The auditorium was being set up, the presentation loaded, microphones tested. At noon, I met briefly with the board to outline the standard quarterly updates. I understand all departments will be present, Richard Stern, our lead investor, commented. Any particular reason for the all-hands approach this quarter? I'm introducing a new company-wide initiative on patient engagement, I replied smoothly. I want everyone to hear it directly from me. It wasn't entirely false. We did have a new patient engagement strategy rolling out. It just wasn't the real reason for the all-hands meeting. Excellent, Richard nodded, apparently satisfied. The more alignment across departments, the better. At 1:55, I stood backstage in the auditorium, reviewing my notes one final time. Through the curtain, I could hear the buzz of conversation as employees filed in, filling the 300-seat space. Somewhere in that crowd sat Robert Taylor, unaware that his past was about to collide with his present. We're ready when you are, Ms. Miller, the AV technician informed me. Presentation is loaded, microphone tested. I nodded, smoothing down my dress and squaring my shoulders. At exactly 2:00, the lights dimmed, and the company logo appeared on the massive screen behind. The stage, my cue. I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight finding me as applause rippled through the auditorium. Scanning the crowd, I located Robert immediately. Middle section, about 12 rows back. His expression registered surprise as he saw me, followed by a flash of recognition that confirmed what I'd suspected. He hadn't known until this moment who owned Vitality Medical Solutions. Good afternoon, Vitality, I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedules for our quarterly update. For the next 20 minutes, I delivered a standard corporate address, highlighting achievements, acknowledging challenges, outlining future goals. The audience was attentive, responsive, unaware of the personal drama unfolding beneath the professional veneer. Robert never took his eyes off me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. Before we conclude, I said, transitioning to the final segment, I'd like to address our new patient engagement initiative. I clicked to the next slide, which showed our core values: innovation, integrity, impact. Vitality Medical Solutions was built on these 3 principles. When I founded this company 3 years ago, I made a promise to myself and to every person who would join us. We would never compromise on these values, no matter the pressure, no matter the cost. My eyes found Robert's again, and I saw the realization dawning in his expression. Who I had become, what I had built, all while he'd been absent. Innovation isn't just about technology, it's about finding new solutions to old problems. Integrity isn't just about honesty, It's about standing by your commitments even when they're difficult. The auditorium had gone completely silent, the audience sensing that I'd moved beyond the standard corporate script. And impact isn't measured in quarterly returns or market share. It's measured in lives improved, in families supported, in futures secured. I paused, standing at a crossroads. I could expose Robert now, in front of the entire company. I could watch him squirm as I revealed exactly what kind of man he was. The type who abandoned his pregnant wife, who rejected his unborn child, who ran away when responsibility became uncomfortable. The words were there, waiting to be spoken. But as I looked out at the sea of faces, the employees who'd helped build Vitality, who'd trusted my vision and leadership, I realized that using this platform for personal vengeance would betray the very values I'd just espoused. And somewhere across town, my daughter was creating a family portrait with a question mark where her father should be. Our new patient engagement initiative puts these values into action, I continued, making my decision. Starting next month, every Vitality product will include direct feedback channels for patients to share their experiences, their challenges, and their suggestions for improvement. I completed the presentation as planned, outlining the new initiative with professional detachment. As I concluded and the lights came up, I noticed Robert slip quietly out a side door. Backstage, Claire was waiting. "That's not how I expected that to go," she said, studying my face. "You had him dead to rights." "And what would that have accomplished?" I asked, gathering my notes. "Public humiliation? Temporary satisfaction at the cost of my professional reputation." "He deserves worse," Claire muttered. "Probably," I agreed. "But Lily deserves better than a mother who uses her position to settle personal scores." Claire's expression softened. "So what now?" "Now I have a conversation with Robert Taylor, not as CEO to employee, but as mother to absent father." I returned to my office, instructing Sam to find Robert and send him to me in 30 minutes. Enough time for me to center myself and prepare for the confrontation that had been 3 years in the making. The knock came precisely on time. "Come in," I called, standing behind my desk rather than sitting, a power position I'd learned early in my career. Robert entered, his face pale, his posture uncertain, a stark contrast to the confident man I'd married. "Jennifer," he said, his voice barely audible. "Mr. Taylor," I replied, keeping my tone professional. "Please, sit down." He lowered himself into the chair across from me, his eyes never leaving my face. "I had no idea," he began. "When Charles Lawrence mentioned Vitality was hiring, I never connected it to you. Clearly. If I had known, you wouldn't have applied?" I finished for him. "That would have been a shame. By all accounts, you're performing well in your new role." Confusion crossed his face at my businesslike tone. "I'm not sure I understand what's happening here." I sat down, folding my hands on my desk. "What's happening, Mr. Taylor, is that you've been hired based on your qualifications for a position that matches your current skill set. Your employment status isn't in jeopardy because of our personal history." "Just like that?" He looked, stunned. "After everything that happened?" "Our professional relationship and our personal history are separate matters," I said evenly. "As your employer, my only concern is your job performance. As the mother of your child, a child you've never met, never asked about, never acknowledged beyond court-mandated child support, I have other concerns entirely." He flinched at the steel in my voice. "I deserve that." "You deserve far worse," I said calmly. "But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what Lily deserves." "Lily?" he repeated, the name clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. "You named her Lily?" "Yes, she's 2.5 now. She has your smile in my eyes. She loves dinosaurs and pancakes and believes that the moon Follows our car at night just to keep us safe. Each detail seemed to hit him like a physical blow. I continued, relentless in my precision. Yesterday, she came home from preschool in tears because the other children couldn't understand why her father was a question mark in her family portrait. She asked if she had done something wrong to make you go away. He closed his eyes briefly. Pain etched across his features. I never meant to hurt her. But you did, I said flatly. And now we have to decide what happens next. He looked up, surprise evident in his expression. We? Lily deserves to know where she comes from, even if that story is far from perfect. I won't lie to her or pretend you don't exist. The question is whether you're prepared to be part of her life in any capacity, or if you'd prefer to remain the question mark in her family portrait. Robert swallowed hard. I wouldn't blame you if you kept me away from her entirely. What I did was unforgivable. This isn't about forgiveness, Mr. Taylor. It's about what's best for Lily moving forward. I want to make things right, he said, leaning forward. I've spent the last 3 years trying to outrun the biggest mistake of my life. When Vanessa left me for her attending physician 6 months after we moved to San Francisco, I realized I'd thrown away everything that mattered for a fantasy that wasn't even real. I raised an eyebrow, unmoved by his tale of regret. And it took you another 2.5 years to find your way back to Boston? He shook his head. It took me that long to get sober. When Vanessa left, I fell apart, drinking, missing work, eventually losing my job. I was angry at everyone but myself. It wasn't until I woke up in the hospital after wrapping my car around a tree that I finally faced what I'd done, not just to you, but to my child. My rock bottom led me to rehab, then therapy, then slowly rebuilding some semblance of a life. I hadn't expected this revelation, and despite myself, I felt a flicker of empathy. Not enough to forgive, but enough to listen. I came back to Boston 6 months ago, he continued. I've been working odd jobs, trying to rebuild my career from scratch. When Charles mentioned vitality, it seemed like a lifeline, a chance to use my skills again to prove I could be responsible, reliable. And now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Now I'd like the chance to meet my daughter, he said simply. On your terms, with whatever boundaries you feel are necessary. I don't expect to walk into her life as daddy. I haven't earned that. But maybe someday I could be someone positive in her world. I studied him, searching for deception, for manipulation, finding only tired honesty. Part of me wanted to refuse him outright, to protect Lily from the risk of further abandonment. But another part, the part that had seen her questioning her own worth because of his absence, knew that might do more harm than good in the long run. I need time, I finally said. This isn't just about you and me. It's about what's best for Lily. If I do allow you to meet her, it will be a carefully managed introduction with professional guidance and absolutely no promises about ongoing contact unless you prove yourself trustworthy. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, Jennifer. That's more than I deserve. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Taylor. I haven't decided anything. I stood, signaling that our conversation was over. In the meantime, your position here is secure, provided your performance remains satisfactory. I suggest you focus on proving yourself professionally before I consider allowing you any role in Lily's life. He nodded, standing as well. I understand. And Jennifer, what you've built here is remarkable. You were always brilliant, but this... He gestured to encompass the office, the building, the company. This is extraordinary. I know, I said simply because it was true. I had built something extraordinary, not just a successful company, but a meaningful life for Lily and myself without him, despite him. As he turned to leave, a question that had been nagging at me surfaced. The childcare comment you made to a colleague, About picking up a kid from after-school care. Who were you referring to? He looked surprised at the question. My nephew, my sister's son. I watch him sometimes when her regular sitter cancels. So there was no other child, no family he'd chosen to stay with when he couldn't bear to. Stay with us. The relief I felt was irrational but powerful nonetheless. One more thing, I said as he reached the door. Your position on the Cleveland Clinic presentation. He turned, resignation in his eyes. I understand if you need to reassign me. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I'd like to know if you're confident in your ability to deliver it successfully. Your background in healthcare marketing is still relevant, despite your career interruptions. Surprise replaced resignation. Yes, I believe I can handle it. I've been studying the materials day and night. I nodded, making a mental note. That's all for now, Mr. Taylor. You may return to your department. After he left, I sat alone in my office, thoughts swirling. The confrontation I'd anticipated for days had gone nothing like I'd expected. I'd prepared for anger, for defensiveness, even for hostility. Instead, I'd encountered contrition, honesty, and a seemingly genuine desire to make amends. The question remained, could I trust it? More importantly, should I allow Lily to? My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Lily's having a wonderful time at the park. She drew a picture of all three of us having a picnic. When should I bring her home? About an hour, I replied. Everything okay there? Perfect. No unexpected visitors, if that's what you're asking. I put the phone down, my mind made up. Before making any decisions about Robert's place in Lily's life, I needed to understand exactly who he'd become in the 3 years since he'd walked away from us. And as his employer, I had unique access to find out. I opened my calendar and scheduled a meeting with the company counselor for the following afternoon. If Robert was serious about making amends, about being part of Lily's life in any capacity, he would need to prove it, not just for a day or a week, but consistently, reliably, permanently. The sun was setting as I gathered my things, casting long shadows across my office floor. Outside, Boston was transitioning from workday to evening, lights coming on in office buildings and apartments across the skyline. Somewhere in this city was a little girl who believed the moon followed her car to keep her safe, who didn't understand why her father was a question mark in her family portrait. She deserved better than uncertainty. She deserved the truth, delivered with kindness and age-appropriate clarity. She deserved to know that her father's absence wasn't her fault, that she was worthy of love, that she was enough, more than enough, exactly as she was. And perhaps eventually, she deserved the chance to form her own opinion about the man who had walked away before she was born. Not because he had earned forgiveness, but because understanding her own story was her right, not my decision, to make. The revelation brought an unexpected sense of peace. This wasn't about Robert or even about me anymore. It was about Lily, her needs, her future, her sense of self. Whatever came next would be determined by that North Star alone. 2 weeks passed in a careful dance of observation and assessment. I hadn't immediately rejected Robert's request to meet Lily, nor had I granted it. Instead, I'd created a third option, a period of evaluation during which I could determine whether the man who'd walked away deserved a second chance with our daughter. The Cleveland presentation is tomorrow, Sam reminded me as she placed a stack of reports on my desk. Mr. Taylor's final rehearsal is scheduled for 3 p.m. if you want to observe. I nodded, reviewing the schedule. And Dr. Lawrence confirmed his attendance? Yes, along with their entire implementation team. Conference room A is reserved for the full afternoon. Perfect. After Sam left, I pulled up the surveillance report on my tablet. For the past 2 weeks, Robert had maintained an exemplary work record, arriving early, staying late, collaborating effectively with his team. He'd taken ownership of the Cleveland presentation, incorporating feedback from multiple departments, rehearsing diligently during lunch breaks and after hours. On a professional level, he was exceeding expectations. The question remained whether that reliability would extend to personal commitments. Should I allow him into Lily's life? My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Miller, Diana is on line 1. She says it's about Lily." My heart rate immediately accelerated as I picked up the phone. "Diana? Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she assured me quickly. "But Lily's preschool? Just called. They're doing a special Father's Day activity next Friday, and Lily's upset about it. I told them I'd discuss it with you." I closed my eyes briefly. Father's Day, the annual minefield I'd been navigating since Lily was born. What year? She'd been too young to fully understand. This year would be different. "What kind of activity?" I asked. "A breakfast. The children make placemats and serve their fathers muffins and juice. Lily told her teacher she doesn't have anyone to invite." My chest tightened painfully. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll call the school." After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the phone. Father's Day was 10 days away. 10 days to decide whether Robert would remain a question mark in Lily's life or become a real person with a name, a face, a presence. The question was no longer theoretical. It had a deadline. I dialed Dr. Sarah Winters, the child psychologist I'd consulted when I first considered allowing Robert to meet Lily. "Jennifer," she greeted me warmly. "I was just reviewing my notes from our consultation. Have you made a decision about introducing Lily to her father?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But circumstances are forcing the issue. Lily's preschool is having a Father's Day event next week, and she's upset about not having anyone to bring." "I see," Dr. Winters said thoughtfully. "And how is her father doing with the parameters you established?" "Professionally, he's exceeding expectations. He seems committed to rebuilding his career, demonstrating responsibility and follow-through." That's a positive sign, but career performance doesn't always translate to parenting commitment. Has he continued to express interest in meeting Lily? He asks about her, appropriately, not pushing. He's respected my boundaries completely. There was a pause on the line. "Jennifer, we've discussed the psychological impact of father absence on young children. While protecting Lily from potential disappointment is understandable, there's also risk in perpetuating the absence when a willing father is available." "Even a father who walked away once before?" I countered. "People can change," she said gently. "The question is whether he's changed enough to be a positive presence in Lily's life, and whether you're prepared to facilitate that relationship despite the hurt he caused you." Her words hit home. Was I still protecting Lily, or was I punishing Robert? "What would you recommend?" I asked finally. "A supervised introduction in a neutral setting, perhaps with me present to facilitate. Start with a short meeting, manage expectations on both sides, and see how Lily responds. Father's Day might actually provide a natural occasion, but only if you feel he's earned that opportunity." I thanked her and promised to call back once I'd made my decision. The Cleveland presentation would be the final test. If Robert could handle that pressure, representing vitality to our most significant potential partner, perhaps he deserved the chance to meet his daughter. At 2:55, I slipped quietly into the observation room adjacent to Conference Room A. Through the one-way glass, I could see Robert arranging materials, checking the presentation technology, preparing for his final rehearsal before tomorrow's actual pitch. He looked different than he had 2 weeks ago. More confident, his posture straighter, his movements purposeful. The suit he wore was new, I noticed, and properly tailored. A small but significant investment in his professional appearance. Marcus and Claire entered the conference room, along with Anthony from presentation training. "All right, Robert," Marcus began. "Let's run through this exactly as if Dr. Lawrence and his team were here. No stops, no corrections during the presentation." We'll give feedback afterward. Robert nodded, taking a deep breath. Ready when you are. What followed impressed even my critical eye. Robert delivered a compelling presentation on Vitality's glucose monitoring system, explaining complex technology in accessible terms, highlighting patient outcomes rather than technical specifications, addressing potential implementation challenges proactively. When Claire deliberately posed difficult questions, a standard part of our rehearsal process, he responded with thoughtful, substantive answers. Very solid, Anthony commented when Robert finished. You've clearly put in the work. Any questions from your end before tomorrow? Just one, Robert said. I've been thinking about the patient testimony section. The statistics are powerful, but I'm wondering if we should include a brief video from one of our pediatric patients. The Cleveland partnership would significantly expand our reach in pediatric endocrinology. I raised an eyebrow, impressed by the suggestion. Our pediatric application was something I felt particularly passionate about, but we hadn't emphasized it in the standard presentation. That's an excellent point, Marcus agreed. Dr. Lawrence mentioned his interest in pediatric applications during his last visit. Claire, do we have clearance to use Jason's video? Claire nodded. His parents signed all the releases. I can have it incorporated into the deck by tomorrow morning. I slipped out of the observation room before they concluded, satisfied with what I'd seen. Robert was not just doing the minimum, he was bringing his full experience and insight to the role, despite his junior position in the company. Back in my office, I made a decision that surprised even me. I picked up the phone and called Lily's preschool. Ms. Peterson, this is Jennifer Miller, Lily's mother. I understand you're planning a Father's Day breakfast next Friday. Yes, Ms. Miller. We were concerned about how to include Lily appropriately. We certainly don't want her to feel left out. I appreciate that, I said. Actually, there's a possibility that Lily's father may be able to attend. Could you hold a space for him, pending confirmation early next week? Of course. Ms. Peterson sounded surprised, but pleased. We'd be happy to include him. After hanging up, I texted Dr. Winters to schedule a preparatory session for the weekend. If Robert succeeded with the Cleveland presentation tomorrow, I would offer him the opportunity to attend the Father's Day breakfast, with extensive preparation and clearly defined boundaries. The next morning, I dressed with particular care. A dove gray suit with subtle authority, pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, a quiet confidence that came from knowing I was making decisions based on Lily's best interests, not my own wounded heart. The observation room is prepared, Ms. Miller, Sam informed me as I arrived. Dr. Lawrence and his team are scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m. Mr. Taylor has been in conference room A since 7:30, making final preparations. I nodded my approval. No interruptions during the presentation unless it's truly urgent. The Cleveland team arrived precisely on time. Dr. Lawrence, 3 department heads, and their chief technology officer. I greeted them in the reception area, exchanging pleasantries before escorting them to the conference room. Robert stood as we entered, professional and poised. If he was nervous about presenting to the CEO, who was also his ex-wife, along with our most important potential partner, he didn't show it. Dr. Lawrence, allow me to introduce Robert Taylor, who will be leading today's presentation, I said, smoothly. Robert has extensive experience in medical technology communication and has been instrumental in developing our implementation approach for Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Lawrence shook Robert's hand warmly. Looking forward to it. Charles speaks highly of your ability to translate complex concepts for diverse audiences. Thank you, sir. I've prepared a comprehensive overview, but I'm happy to adjust focus based on your team's specific interests. I took a seat at the side of the room, allowing Robert to command the presentation space. For the next 90 minutes, I watched him deliver an even stronger presentation than he had during rehearsal, incorporating the pediatric patient video to powerful effect. When Dr. Lawrence's technology officer raised concerns about integration with their existing systems, a potential deal breaker we'd been anticipating, Robert handled it masterfully, acknowledging the challenge while demonstrating our compatibility, solutions without overselling or dismissing valid concerns. As the presentation concluded, Dr. Lawrence turned to me with an approving nod. "Very impressive, Jennifer. Your team has addressed all our major implementation questions. I think we're ready to move forward with a pilot program in our pediatric endocrinology department." "Excellent," I replied, professional satisfaction flooding through me. "Robert will coordinate with your implementation team to establish timelines and resource requirements." After the Cleveland team departed, I lingered in the conference room as Robert gathered his materials, the other Vitality staff having returned to their departments. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "That was exceptionally well done." He looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "Thank you. Coming from you, that means a great deal." Dr. Lawrence isn't easily impressed. "You've helped secure a partnership that will benefit thousands of patients." He nodded, accepting the praise without false modesty. "The pediatric application is where I think we can make the most meaningful difference. When I was researching for this presentation, I kept thinking about children like Lily. Not that she needs our device, but children her age who do." The mention of our daughter shifted the atmosphere in the room. "About Lily," I began, choosing my words carefully. "Her preschool is having a Father's Day breakfast next Friday. She's been upset about not having anyone to bring." Robert went very still, his eyes searching my face. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm considering allowing you to attend," I clarified, "but there would be conditions, extensive conditions." "Of course," he said quickly, "whatever you think is appropriate. Dr. Winters, Lily's psychologist, would need to meet with you first. We would need to prepare Lily carefully for the introduction. The meeting would be brief, supervised by me the entire time. There would be no promises about future contact until we see how this initial meeting affects her." He listened intently, nodding at each stipulation. "I understand completely. I would never want to do anything that might upset her." "This isn't forgiveness," I felt compelled to clarify. "This is me putting Lily's needs ahead of my own feelings about what happened between us." "I know," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness, Jennifer. What I did was unforgivable. But I am grateful for the opportunity to meet my daughter on whatever terms you set." I studied him, searching for any hint of entitlement or manipulation. Finding none, I made my final decision. "Dr. Winters has availability on Sunday afternoon. Be at her office at 2 p.m. She'll evaluate whether you're prepared for this introduction and provide guidance on appropriate expectations and behavior. I'll be there," he promised. "Thank you, Jennifer." As I walked back to my office, a strange mix of emotions swirled within me. Anxiety about how Lily would respond to meeting her father, lingering anger at Robert for creating this situation in the first place, and an unexpected sense of peace about the decision I'd just made. For the first time in nearly 3 years, I was acting based on Lily's needs rather than reacting to Robert's abandonment. That evening, I sat Lily down for a conversation I'd been rehearsing in my mind all day. "Sweetheart, I want to talk to you about something important," I began, sitting beside her on the living room floor where she was coloring. "It's about the Father's Day breakfast at your school." She looked up, her crayon pausing mid-stroke. "I told Ms. Peterson I can't go because I don't have a daddy." "Well, that's what I want to talk about," I said gently. "You do have a father, Lily. He hasn't been part of our lives, but he exists." Her eyes widened. "Like in the pictures you showed me?" "Yes, exactly. His name is Robert, and he actually works at my company now." She considered this new information, her little brow furrowed in concentration. "Does he know about me?" "He does," I answered honestly. "And he's asked to meet you." "Really?" Her voice rose with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "Really? How would you feel about meeting him? Maybe having him come to your father's day breakfast next week? She thought about this carefully, in the deliberate way she approached all important decisions at her age. Would he stay this time? Tyler says daddies are supposed to stay. The innocent question pierced my heart. I don't know, sweetheart. That's something we would have to see over time. But I want you to understand something very important. I took her small hands in mine. Whether he stays or goes is about him, not about you. You are perfect exactly as you are. But if I'm really good? No, I said firmly, recognizing the dangerous thought pattern forming. Listen to me, Lily. When your father left, you weren't even born yet. His choice had nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own fears and problems. Nothing you do or don't do will change how adults behave. That's not your responsibility. She nodded solemnly, though I wasn't sure how much of this concept she could truly grasp at her age. So, I continued more lightly, would you like to meet him? It's completely your choice. If you're not ready, that's absolutely okay. Can I think about it? She asked, surprising me with her maturity. Of course you can, I assured her. Take all the time you need. She returned to her coloring, adding careful strokes to her picture, a family of dinosaurs under a bright yellow sun. After a few minutes, she looked up again. Is he nice? She asked simply. The question caught me off guard. How to answer honestly without tainting her perception before she even met him. He seems to be trying very hard to be a good person now, I said carefully. People can change and grow, just like you're growing every day. She nodded, apparently satisfied with this response. I think I want to meet him, she decided. But can you hold my hand if I get scared? I promise I'll be right there the whole time, I assured her, pulling her into a tight hug to hide the sudden tears in my eyes. Sunday arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Robert's session with Dr. Winters was scheduled for 2 p.m., and she would call me afterward with her assessment. I'd spent the morning with Lily at the park, trying to maintain our normal routine while my mind raced with contingency plans for every possible outcome. At 3:45, my phone rang, Dr. Winters calling as promised. Jennifer, she began, I've just finished my session with Robert. And I couldn't keep the tension from my voice. He demonstrates a clear understanding of the gravity of his past, actions, and the potential impact on Lily. He has realistic expectations about the introduction. No fantasies about instant fatherhood or erasing the past 3 years. Most importantly, he seems genuinely committed to prioritizing Lily's emotional well-being, even if that means limiting his role in her life. I exhaled slowly. So, you believe the meeting can proceed? Yes, with the boundaries we've discussed. He's agreed to follow your lead completely, to answer Lily's questions honestly but age-appropriately, and to make no promises about future involvement until you've established a clear framework together. Relief mingled with lingering apprehension. Thank you, Sarah. I'll proceed with the introduction on Friday. One more thing, Dr. Winters added. Robert asked if he could bring a small gift for Lily. Nothing extravagant, just a token for their first meeting. I suggested you might be more comfortable vetting any gift in advance. I considered this. What did he have in mind? A stuffed dinosaur. Apparently you'd mentioned Lily loves them. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, remembering this detail about Lily's interest from our brief conversation, surprised me. That would be acceptable, I agreed. But please remind him that gifts are not a substitute for consistent presence. He understands that completely, Dr. Winters assured me. In fact, he specifically said he doesn't want to be the fun weekend dad who shows up with presents, but rather someone Lily can count on for everyday support, if you eventually allow that level of involvement. After hanging up, I texted Robert confirming the Father's Day breakfast and outlining specific parameters. Arrive 15 minutes early to meet with me before Lily arrived. Follow my lead on the introduction. Keep the interaction light and brief for this first meeting." His response was immediate. "I understand completely. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let Lily down." The words sent an unexpected chill through me. How many times had I heard similar promises from him before? But this was different. I reminded myself. This wasn't about us. This was about giving Lily the chance to know her father, with all the protections I could put in place to minimize potential harm. The days leading up to Friday passed in a blur of professional obligations and careful preparation. I read Lily age-appropriate books about diverse family structures, reinforced that she was loved and safe regardless of what happened with her father, and answered her increasingly frequent questions about Robert with measured honesty. "Does he like dinosaurs like me?" she asked on Wednesday evening. "I'm not sure," I answered truthfully. "You can ask him when you meet him." "Does he know how to make pancakes?" "I think he used to. He made them for me sometimes before you were born." Each question tugged at memories I'd carefully packed. Away. The man who had once been the center of my world, whose child I had joyfully agreed to carry, whose absence had nearly broken me before ultimately making me stronger. Friday morning arrived with perfect June weather, sunshine streaming through Lily's bedroom window as I helped her dress in the outfit she'd chosen specially for the occasion. A purple dress with tiny dinosaurs embroidered around the hem, white, sandals, and her favorite heart-shaped barrette. "Do I look pretty, Mommy?" she asked, twirling in front of the mirror. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I assured her, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Are you excited about today?" She nodded, though I noticed her chewing her lower lip, a sure sign of nervousness. "Remember," I said, kneeling to her level, "this is just a breakfast at school. We're meeting Robert and seeing how it goes. You don't have to do or say anything. You don't want to, and I'll be right beside you the whole time." "What if he doesn't like me?" she whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. "That's not possible," I said firmly. "Not liking you would be like not liking sunshine or rainbows or chocolate ice cream. Some things are just universally good." This earned me a small smile, though the worry lingered in her eyes. We arrived at the preschool 20 minutes early, as planned. Ms. Peterson greeted us warmly, directing us to the classroom where the breakfast would be held. Tables had been arranged in a U-shape, decorated with construction paper placemats clearly made by the children. Lily immediately spotted hers and ran to show me the dinosaur family she'd drawn. "This is you," she explained, pointing to a large, purple dinosaur. "And this is me," she added, indicating a smaller green one. She hesitated, then pointed to a blue dinosaur standing slightly apart from the others. "And I guess this is Robert." I squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "That's a wonderful picture, Lily." A knock at the classroom door announced Robert's arrival. Ms. Peterson ushered him in, and I felt Lily press against my side as she caught her first real-life glimpse of her father. Robert had dressed appropriately for the occasion. Nice, but not formal, in khakis and a blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes. Lily's eyes. He carried a small gift bag and wore an expression of barely contained emotion. I crossed the room to meet him, positioning myself between him and Lily. "Good. Morning, Robert." "Jennifer?" He nodded, his voice slightly unsteady. "Thank you again for this opportunity." I took the gift bag he offered, examining the contents. A medium-sized stuffed stegosaurus, Lily's favorite dinosaur, with no extravagant extras or inappropriate additions. "This is acceptable," I said quietly. "Remember, follow my lead. This is overwhelming for her." He nodded, his gaze moving past me to where Lily stood watching us with wide eyes. "I understand." I returned to Lily, kneeling beside her. "Lily, this is Robert. Robert, this is Lily." Robert knelt down as well, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hello, Lily. It's very nice to meet you." Lily studied him with the intense focus she brought to new experiences. "You have eyes like mine," she observed. A smile broke across Robert's face, the genuine, unguarded smile I remembered from happier times. "Yes, I do. Your mom's eyes are brown, but you and I have blue ones." "Do you like dinosaurs?" she asked, getting right to her most pressing question. "I do," Robert answered. "Especially Stegosaurus. I heard that might be your favorite too." She nodded solemnly. "They have plates on their backs for protection, and they're vegetarians." "That's right," Robert said, clearly impressed. "You know a lot about dinosaurs." "Mom takes me to the museum to see the bones," Lily explained, warming to the topic. "We went 3 times this year." Robert glanced at me, a look of gratitude passing between us for this small opening Lily had provided. "I brought you something," he said, gesturing to the bag I still held. "Would it be okay if your mom gives it to you?" I handed Lily the bag, watching as she peeked inside, and then gave a small gasp of delight. She pulled out the stuffed Stegosaurus, examining it carefully before hugging it to her chest. "Thank you," she said politely. "His name is Spike." "That's a perfect name," Robert agreed. Other families had begun arriving, filling the classroom with the cheerful chaos of young children and their fathers. Ms. Peterson called everyone to find their seats for breakfast. "Would it be okay if Robert sits with us?" I asked Lily quietly. She thought about this, then nodded. "He can sit by my dinosaur picture." The 3 of us settled at Lily's assigned spot, Robert carefully following my lead in every interaction. As the children proudly served juice and muffins they had helped prepare, I watched Lily gradually relax, even sharing small details about her school day with Robert when he asked gentle, appropriate questions. "I'm learning to write my name," she told him, demonstrating on a spare paper placemat, Lily. "That's excellent writing," Robert praised. "Sincerely, very neat and clear." "Mom practices with me every night," she explained. "She says good handwriting is important." "Your mom is very smart," Robert said, catching my eye briefly. "She taught me a lot of important things too." As the breakfast concluded, the children presented their fathers with construction paper ties they had decorated. Lily hesitated before shyly offering hers to Robert. "I made this yesterday," she explained. "Ms. Peterson said I could bring it home, but you can have it if you want." Robert accepted the paper tie, covered in green and purple dinosaur stickers, with the reverence one might reserve for a priceless artifact. "Thank you, Lily. This is the most special gift I've ever received. I'll keep it safe forever." As the event wound down, I could see Lily growing tired from the emotional exertion of the morning. "We should probably head home soon," I told her, watching for her reaction. "Okay," she agreed, then turned to Robert. "Are you coming too?" The innocent question hung in the air between us. Robert looked to me, carefully respecting the boundaries we'd established. "Not today, sweetheart," I answered for him. "Robert has to go to work, and we have our swimming lesson this afternoon. But maybe we can see him another time if you'd like that." She considered this, then nodded. "Maybe he could come to the park sometime. I could show him how I can go across the monkey bars all by myself." "I'd like that very much," Robert said softly, "whenever your mom thinks it's a good idea." As we prepared to leave, Lily surprised both of us by offering Robert a quick, shy hug. "Thank you for coming to my breakfast," she said formally, as though reciting a practiced line. "Thank you for letting me come," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It was the best breakfast I've ever had." Outside in the parking lot, I found myself facing Robert alone while Lily waited in my car, already engrossed in examining her new stuffed dinosaur. "Thank you," he said simply. "She's extraordinary, Jennifer. You've done an amazing job with her." "Yes, I have," I agreed without false modesty. She is extraordinary. What happens now? He asked cautiously. I considered the morning's events. Lily's reactions, my own conflicted feelings. Now we take things one step at a time. If Lily continues to express interest in seeing you, we can arrange another short, supervised visit. Perhaps at the park, as she suggested. If at any point she seems confused or distressed, we reevaluate. He nodded, accepting these terms without argument. And at work? At work, nothing changes. Your performance continues to be evaluated on its own merits. Our personal history and this co-parenting arrangement, if it develops, remain entirely separate matters. I understand, he said. For what it's worth, Jennifer, seeing the amazing person you've become, both as a mother and as a CEO, makes me even more aware of what I threw away. I can never undo that mistake, but I can try to be worthy of whatever small role you allow me in Lily's life moving forward. I studied him, searching for manipulation or calculation in his words, finding only what appeared to be genuine regret and determination. Prove it, I said simply. Not with words or grand gestures, but with consistent, reliable presence. That's what Lily needs, what she deserves. I intend to, he promised, for as long as it takes. As I drove away, Lily chattering happily, in the back seat about her new dinosaur and the muffins she'd helped make, I realized we had crossed an invisible threshold. Whatever happened next, the question mark in Lily's family portrait had been replaced with a real person. Flawed, fallible, but present. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was something else entirely. A careful reconstruction of family on new terms, with Lily's well-being as the only consideration that truly mattered. For the first time in 3 years, I felt not just strong, but free. No longer defined by Robert's abandonment, but by my own choices as a mother, a leader, and a woman who had built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. 6 months passed, transforming the tentative connection between Lily and Robert into something that resembled a genuine father-daughter relationship. What had begun with supervised visits to the park had gradually evolved into weekend outings, dinner at his apartment once a week, and most recently, his attendance at her preschool graduation ceremony where he'd sat beside me, camera in hand, his face reflecting the same pride and wonder I felt watching our daughter accept her construction paper diploma. The morning sun filtered through my kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast, listening to Lily's animated chatter about the day ahead. Today marked a significant milestone, Robert's first time taking her for an entire day without my supervision. They were going to the Museum of Science, one of Lily's favorite places, followed by lunch at a dinosaur-themed restaurant she'd been begging to visit. Do you think Daddy will like the electricity show? Lily asked, carefully arranging her dinosaur figurines on the kitchen island. The one with the big lightning? The word Daddy still sent a small shock through me each time I heard it, though I'd agreed, after consulting with Dr. Winters, that Lily could use the term if she felt comfortable doing so. She'd begun using it about 2 months ago, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence as Robert consistently showed up when promised, remembered her preferences, and genuinely engaged with her world. I'm sure he will, I replied, flipping pancakes, dinosaur-shaped at Lily's request. Robert likes science too. Like me. She nodded seriously, as though confirming an important connection between them. The doorbell rang precisely at 9. Robert was nothing if not punctual these days, a marked contrast to the chronically late man I'd known years ago. I'll get it, Lily announced, scrambling down from her stool and racing to the door. I followed at a more measured pace, arriving in the entryway as Lily flung open the door and launched herself into Robert's arms. He caught her easily, his face lighting up with the genuine joy that always appeared when he saw his daughter. Good morning, dinosaur expert, he greeted her, their standard salutation. Ready for our big adventure? Yes, Lily exclaimed, But first, Mom made dinosaur pancakes. You can have some too. Robert looked up, meeting my eyes over Lily's head. That's if your mom doesn't mind me joining breakfast. These small moments of deference had become our new normal. Robert carefully respecting my authority as Lily's primary parent, never assuming, always asking permission before changing even minor plans. There's plenty, I said with a small nod. We were just sitting down. In the kitchen, I observed the easy rapport that had developed between them. Robert listening intently as Lily described her latest dinosaur drawings, asking questions that showed he'd been paying attention to her evolving interests, remembering details from previous conversations that even I sometimes forgot. I've been reading those books you recommended, he told her, accepting a plate of pancakes, about the new theories on how T-Rex might have looked. With feathers, Lily exclaimed, like a giant chicken but scary. Exactly, he nodded seriously. The museum we're going to today has a new exhibit about that very thing. As they ate, I prepared Lily's backpack with the essentials: change of clothes, water bottle, snacks, emergency contact information. Though Robert had proven himself reliable over the past 6 months, old habits of vigilance died hard. Here's her EpiPen, I said, handing it to Robert along with her backpack. She hasn't had any reaction since the strawberry incident last year, but better safe than sorry, he finished for me. I've downloaded the food allergy app you recommended, and I've already called the restaurant to confirm they can accommodate her restrictions. I nodded, surprised and admittedly impressed by his thoroughness. And you have the schedule? Museum until noon, lunch at Dino's, home by 3 for her rest period, he recited. I'll text you when we arrive at each location, and I've charged my phone fully. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined trusting Robert with a grocery shopping errand, let alone a full day with our daughter. Yet here we were, his careful attention to Lily's needs, gradually rebuilding the trust his abandonment had shattered. As they prepared to leave, Lily gave me a fierce hug. Bye, Mommy. Don't work too hard today. I promise, I smiled, smoothing her curls. Have fun and listen to Robert, okay? I will. As Robert helped her with her jacket, he glanced at, thank you for this, Jennifer. I know it's a big step. I nodded, acknowledging the significance without elaborating. Just bring her home safe. Always, he promised. After they left, the house felt strangely empty. I'd grown accustomed to sharing Lily with Diana on workdays, but weekends had always been our sacred time together. This new arrangement, giving up precious hours of my limited time with my daughter to accommodate Robert's growing role in her life, was an adjustment I was still processing. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Everything set for Monday's board meeting? Lawrence wants to discuss expansion timeline. Right. Work. I'd deliberately scheduled various professional tasks to keep myself occupied during Lily's outing with Robert, a strategy Dr. Winters had suggested to manage any anxiety the separation might trigger. I settled at my home office desk, diving into preparation for Monday's meeting. Vitality was growing exponentially since securing the Cleveland partnership. Our pediatric application was proving even more successful than projected, and we had pending inquiries from 3 major hospital systems. The IPO we'd been working toward was now scheduled for early next year, the culmination of everything I'd built while raising Lily alone. Except I wasn't entirely alone anymore, at least not when it came to parenting. Robert's consistent presence over the past 6 months had gradually shifted some of the weight I'd carried for nearly 3 years. My phone buzzed again. A photo from Robert showing Lily standing beside an enormous dinosaur skeleton, her face alight with wonder. Made it to the museum, already learning about prehistoric creatures I can't pronounce. I smiled despite myself, sending back a quick thumbs up. Another buzz brought a second message. She's asking good questions about evolutionary biology that I can't answer. You've been teaching her advanced concepts. She's naturally curious, I replied. The children's librarian keeps recommending books 2 grade levels above her age. Our text exchanges had evolved from purely logistical to these small moments of shared parental pride. A development I hadn't anticipated when I first allowed Robert back into Lily's life. The morning passed quickly as I alternated between work and checking the periodic updates Robert sent. Lily watching the electricity show with wide-eyed amazement. Lily explaining planetary rotation to another child in the space exhibit. Lily receiving a junior scientist badge from a museum volunteer who'd been impressed by her knowledge. At noon, a new text arrived. Headed to lunch now. She's getting tired but insists she's not. Classic Lily determination. I smiled at his accurate assessment of our daughter's stubborn streak. Offer a small rest in the car before lunch. She'll resist but will be happier afterward. Good call, he responded a few minutes later. She's having a 2-minute eye rest, which has already turned into a power nap. We'll wake her before we get to the restaurant. This easy co-parenting communication still felt surreal sometimes, sharing insights about our daughter with the man who'd once walked away from the very idea of parenthood. By 2 o'clock, I found myself glancing at the clock more frequently, calculating their expected return time. Though I trusted Robert, a trust painfully rebuilt over months of consistent reliability, old anxieties still surfaced occasionally. What if he decided this was too much responsibility after all? What if he disappeared again, leaving Lily with fresh wounds that would cut deeper than his original abandonment? A video call from Diana interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "How's the first solo daddy day going?" she asked when I answered. "Fine," I said, realizing I'd been pacing my living room. "They're at lunch now. Should be home in about an hour." "And how are you doing?" she asked knowingly. I sighed, settling onto the couch, alternating between productive work and catastrophic, imagining. "Which is completely normal," Diana assured me. The first time I left Noah with his father after the divorce, I called the police because they were 30 minutes late coming home. Turned out they'd just stopped for ice cream. The comparison made me smile. Diana's experiences as a single mother had been my guideposts through the challenges of raising Lily alone. "It's not that I don't trust Robert," I tried to explain. It's just that he hurt you both profoundly once before, and part of you is waiting for history to repeat itself," Diana finished for me. "That's natural, Jen. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, especially not after what he did." "Lily adores him," I said quietly. "She's flourishing with his attention. Dr. Winter says her confidence has grown significantly since he's been consistently involved." "That's wonderful," Diana agreed. "And what about you? How are you feeling about Robert these days?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on managing Lily's relationship with her father that I'd deliberately avoided examining my own evolving feelings toward him. "He's not the same person he was," I said carefully. "The man I married would never have had the patience for museum exhibits or the foresight to research food allergies before a restaurant visit. He's grown up." "Growth is good," Diana observed. "For both of you." "What does that mean?" "It means you've grown too, Jen. The woman who fell apart when Robert left wouldn't recognize the powerhouse CEO and mother you've become. You're both different people now." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another text from Robert. "Lunch complete. 1 dinosaur-shaped burger consumed with great enthusiasm. Heading home now, should be there in 30 minutes or so." "They're on their way back," I told Diana. "Right on schedule." "See? No police calls necessary," she teased. "Call me later if you want to talk more. I'm taking Noah to his soccer game soon." After hanging up, I found myself straightening up the already tidy house, a nervous habit. From my early days as a single mother, when control over my environment had been one of the few things I could manage. At precisely 2:45, I heard Robert's car in the driveway. Peering through the window, I watched as he helped a clearly tired but happy Lily from her car seat, listening intently as she continued chattering despite her evident fatigue. The front door opened, and Lily burst in, clutching a new stuffed triceratops and wearing a junior scientist badge. "Mommy, the museum had real dinosaur bones, and we saw lightning inside a ball, and my burger had spikes made of cheese." I knelt to receive her enthusiastic hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo now mingled with the faint aroma of French fries. "It sounds like you had an amazing time." "The best day ever," she confirmed solemnly, then interrupted herself with a massive yawn. Robert stood in the doorway, carrying Lily's backpack and a small gift shop bag. "Someone might need that rest period a bit early today," he observed with a smile. "We covered almost the entire museum." My feet walked a million steps. Lily agreed, yawning again. "Why don't you go wash your hands and then we can look at all your souvenirs while you rest on the couch?" I suggested. As Lily trudged toward the bathroom, Robert handed me her backpack. "Everything went perfectly," he reported. "She's incredible, Jennifer." The museum staff kept commenting on her knowledge and questions. "Thank you for taking her," I said, realizing I meant it sincerely. "She's been looking forward to this all week." "It was." He paused, searching for words. "An honor, honestly. Getting to experience her excitement, seeing the world through her eyes. I can't believe I almost missed knowing her." The naked regret in his voice resonated with something I'd been carefully keeping at bay. The knowledge that despite his terrible choices, Robert genuinely loved our daughter now. "Well, you're here now," I said finally. "That's what matters to Lily. And to me," he added quietly. "More than anything." He handed me the gift shop bag. Junior Scientist Kit, puzzles and experiments for ages 4-6. I checked that she doesn't already have it. "She'll love that," I acknowledged. "You've gotten good at selecting things she enjoys." "I pay attention," he said simply. "I should have done that from the beginning." Lily returned from the bathroom, another enormous yawn overtaking her. "Can Daddy stay for rest time? He does good dinosaur voices." I glanced at Robert, who carefully maintained a neutral expression, making it clear the decision was entirely mine. "If he doesn't have other plans," I conceded. "No plans," Robert confirmed quickly. "I'd be happy to stay for a while." We settled in the living room, Lily curled between us on the couch as Robert unpacked the small souvenirs they'd collected. Throughout the day, a holographic dinosaur bookmark, a packet of space stickers, her junior scientist badge, and the new stuffed triceratops she'd immediately named Horny, causing Robert to choke back inappropriate laughter. "And look what else," he said, pulling out his phone and showing Lily the screen. "I took 127 pictures today." "Can we see them all?" she asked eagerly. "How about the highlights while you rest?" he suggested. "We can look at all of them another time." As Robert scrolled through photos, narrating their museum adventure, I watched Lily's eyes grow heavier until she finally succumbed to sleep, her head resting against his arm, new triceratops clutched to her chest. "She's out," I whispered, carefully, extracting myself from the couch. "Let me get her blanket." When I returned with Lily's favorite throw, Robert had gently repositioned her so she was lying comfortably on the couch. I draped the blanket over her and stood back, both of us watching our sleeping daughter. "She looks so much like you when she sleeps," Robert observed quietly. "That little furrow between her eyebrows, like she's thinking hard even in her dreams." "But she has your smile," I responded automatically, "and your curiosity." We moved to the kitchen to avoid disturbing her, an unexpectedly domestic moment that felt both strange and familiar. "Coffee?" I offered, needing something to do with my hands. "Please." As I prepared the coffee, Robert leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed yet respectful of the space that wasn't his. "Jennifer, he began hesitantly. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." My guard immediately rose, old fears surfacing. "What is it?" "The Cleveland implementation is expanding to their satellite facilities," he said. "They've asked for a dedicated liaison to oversee the transition. Marcus has recommended me for the position." "I'm aware," I nodded. "It's a good opportunity. You've done excellent work with their team. It would mean more responsibility, more direct client interaction." "You've earned it," I acknowledged. "Your performance reviews have been consistently outstanding." "Thank you," he said. "But there's a complication. The role would require some travel to their regional centers. Not extensive, but regular. 1 or 2 days every few weeks." Understanding dawned. "And you're concerned about how that might affect your time with Lily?" He nodded. "I've worked hard to establish consistency with her. The idea of disrupting that, of not being available when I've promised." He shook his head. "I won't do anything that might make her feel abandoned again, even temporarily." The conscientiousness of his concern touched something in me I'd thought long hardened. "Robert, all parents have work obligations occasionally. Lily understands that." "Does she? She's 3, Jennifer. All she knows is whether I show up when I say I will." I studied him, recognizing the genuine struggle in his expression. "What are you suggesting? That you'll turn down a promotion to avoid missing a play date?" "If necessary, yes," he said without hesitation. "Lily comes first now. Always." The conviction in his voice was unmistakable, and markedly different from the man who had once walked away from impending fatherhood without a backward glance. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully. "But part of being a good parent is modeling healthy ambition and responsibility. Lily should see both her parents succeeding professionally, not just me." "So, you think I should accept the position?" "I think we can work out a schedule that accommodates your travel without disrupting Lily's sense of security," I said. "Perhaps we adjust your regular visits to account for the days you'll be away. Maybe you have video calls with her when you're traveling. We problem solve like parents do." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, followed by cautious hope. "We?" The implication of my words caught up with me. "Yes, we. We're co-parenting now, Robert. That means figuring out these challenges together." He was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "Thank you, Jennifer. That means more than you know." The coffee maker beeped, breaking the moment. I busied myself pouring 2 cups, adding the splash of cream I remembered he preferred. "Speaking of work," he said, accepting the coffee, "congratulations on the IPO announcement. The entire company is buzzing about it." "It's still preliminary," I cautioned. "A lot can happen between now and the target date." "But still incredible," he insisted. "You built something remarkable, Jennifer. From concept to public company in under 4 years, all while being an amazing mother to Lily. It's extraordinary." His admiration seemed genuine, without a trace of the resentment or competitiveness that had occasionally surfaced in our marriage, when my career had shown signs of eclipsing his. "It hasn't been easy," I admitted, "especially in the beginning, trying to secure funding while caring for a newborn." "I can't imagine," he said quietly, guilt flashing across his features. "Though I've tried to, many times, picturing what those early days must have been like for you, alone with a baby and a startup. The memory of those days, the bone-deep exhaustion, the fear, the determination, washed over me. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and the most rewarding." "You shouldn't have had to do it alone," he said, his voice low. "I know I've said it before, but I am truly sorry, Jennifer. Not just for leaving, but for missing those moments. Her first smile, her first steps, all the milestones I threw away." In the living room, Lily stirred slightly, turning over on the couch without waking. We both glanced in her direction, the living embodiment of everything that had changed between us. "You can't get those moments back," I said finally. "But you're here for the ones happening now. That counts for something." "Does it?" he asked, a vulnerability in his expression I rarely saw. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just kidding myself, thinking I can ever make up for what I did, that I can ever be the father she deserves." The raw honesty of his doubt struck me. This wasn't the polished contrition he'd presented in the early days of his return, but something deeper and more genuine, the real struggle of a man confronting the consequences of his worst decisions. Parenthood isn't about perfection, Robert. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's difficult. It's about putting your child's needs above your own. You're doing that now. "Because of the example you set," he said. "Watching you with Lily, seeing how completely you've centered your life around her while still pursuing your own goals, it's taught me what real parenting looks like." The compliment warmed something in me I'd thought long frozen. Well, I had good examples too. Diana was a lifesaver in those early days. "The neighbor who watches Lily sometimes?" I nodded. "She's a single mom too. Her son Noah is 8 now. She showed up with casseroles and practical advice when I brought Lily home from the hospital. Taught me how to give a newborn a bath when I was terrified I'd drop her." Robert smiled sadly. "I'm glad you had support. I used to worry about that in my better moments, whether you had people to help you." "I built a village," I said. "Not the one I expected, but a strong one nonetheless." "And now? Do I have a place in that village?" he asked, the question hanging between us. Before I could answer, Lily's voice called from the living room. "Mommy? Daddy? Where did you go?" "We're in the kitchen, sweetheart," I called back. "Just talking while you rested." Lily appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep, clutching her new triceratops. "I had a dream about dinosaurs," she announced. "They were having a tea party." Robert knelt to her level. "That sounds like an excellent dream. Were they using their best manners?" "The T-Rex kept eating the cookies too fast," she reported seriously. "But the Stegosaurus was very polite." "Of course he was," Robert agreed. "Stegosaurus are known for their impeccable tea party etiquette." Lily giggled, then looked between us. "Are you staying for dinner, Daddy? Mommy and me were going to make pizza." Robert glanced at me, silently asking permission. Though we'd established a regular visitation schedule, unplanned extensions weren't part of our arrangement. The question of his place in our village echoed in my mind. 6 months of consistent presence, of genuine effort, of putting Lily's needs first. 6 months of rebuilding trust, one small gesture at a time. "Yes, Robert can stay for dinner if he'd like," I found myself saying, "but only if he helps make the pizza." "I happen to be an excellent pizza maker," Robert informed Lily solemnly. "I make the best pepperoni faces." "Show me," she demanded, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the refrigerator. As I watched them together, Robert patiently explaining pizza construction techniques to our enthusiastic daughter, I recognized that something fundamental had shifted in our complex family dynamic. Not forgiveness, exactly. The wound of his abandonment had left a scar that would always be part of our story. But perhaps something more important was emerging. A cautious peace, a new understanding based not on the people we had been, but on who we had become through the crucible of the past 3 years. Later, as we sat around the kitchen island eating pizza with remarkably expressive pepperoni faces, Lily regaling us with more details about her museum adventure, I caught Robert watching me with an expression that held both gratitude and something more complex, a recognition of all that had been lost and what perhaps might yet be salvaged. "Mommy, can we do this again?" Lily asked, tomato sauce decorating her chin. "All of us together?" The question hung in the air, deceptively simple, yet laden with implications. Robert remained silent, his eyes on his plate, leaving the decision entirely to me. A year ago, even 6 months ago, I would have deflected, established clear boundaries, reminded everyone that our family didn't work that way. But the woman I'd become, shaped by single motherhood, business leadership, and the hard-won wisdom of rebuilding from betrayal, recognized that life rarely offered neat categories or perfect solutions. "Yes," I said finally. "I think we can do this again sometime." The smile that broke across Lily's face was mirrored, more cautiously, on Robert's. Not a restoration of what was lost, but perhaps the beginning of something new, a family reconfigured, by choice rather than circumstance, defined not by past wounds but by present commitments and future possibilities. "Thank you," Robert said quietly as he helped clear the dishes later, Lily busy drawing dinosaurs at the kitchen table. "For today? For everything." "Don't thank me yet," I warned him. "This is still complicated. I'm still figuring out what comes next." "So am I," he admitted. "But I'm grateful for the chance to figure it out. I know I didn't deserve this opportunity." "No, you didn't," I agreed, my honesty softened by the absence of bitterness. "But Lily deserves every chance at happiness, and right now, that includes having you in her life." "And you?" he asked carefully. "What do you deserve, Jennifer?" The question caught me off guard. So focused had I been on Lily's needs, on building my company, on managing the careful reintroduction of Robert into our lives, that I'd barely considered my own desires beyond professional success and Lily's well-being. "I deserve peace," I said finally. "The chance to build a life that isn't defined solely by your abandonment or my response to it. I've moved beyond being the woman you left behind, Robert. Whatever happens next has to honor that." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You've become extraordinary, Jennifer. I see that every day, not just with Vitality, but with Lily, with everything you do. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just want you to know that I see who you are now, and I'm in awe of her." Something warm and unexpected unfurled in my chest at his words, not the passionate attachment of our early relationship or the bitter resentment that had followed his betrayal, but something new and undefined, a recognition between adults who had traveled difficult roads to arrive at this improbable moment. "Daddy, come see my dinosaur family," Lily called from the table, interrupting the moment. I drew all of us having a picnic with them. As Robert moved to join our daughter, I watched them together, his patient attention, her flourishing confidence, and realized that the empire I'd built wasn't just Vitality Medical Solutions poised for its public offering. It was this: a life reconstructed from heartbreak, a family reimagined on new terms, a future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. The woman Robert had abandoned could never have imagined this moment, could never have believed. That betrayal might eventually lead to something resembling peace. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was the CEO who had built a company from nothing while raising a daughter alone. I was the mother who had found the strength to allow her child's father back into their lives, not from weakness, but from wisdom. I was Jennifer Miller, defined not by what had been done to me, but by what I had created from the aftermath. And, for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.